We're recording. Great. Welcome to week 5, everybody, of the Mastering the Game of Life Masterclass Extravaganza. I should probably land on an official title, but here we are. We're nearing the end. I know that this was going to be an 8-week experiment, but as I was prepping for today, I was like, we're more or less there. Most of your benefit, I think, is going to come out of really getting these abstract concepts as close as you can to your life. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. Today is going to be a lot about embodiment, perspective taking, and really shrinking, getting everything really in your body. So we're going to spend some time in our bodies. But before we jump in too quickly, we'll just do a quick recap what we talked about last week. Last week's class was about developmental levels, and specifically getting an awareness of where your characters fit on sort of a developmental hierarchy. And then you saw all of my crazy diagrams that show the level of depth that one goes to can really affect, how sort of fractured a human experience can be. But if you think about things developmentally, you can kind of get all of your parts to be in alignment and move in the direction of whoever is running the show at the top. And so we're going to take that to the sort of the next level today and give you some tools to, as you're looking at like your workbook, your year, 90-day, 30-day vision, weekly, and daily, ways for you to kind of take the experience away from like the meditations and from the abstract journaling practices that you're doing into techniques that can maybe help you, start getting your characters in your head, in your body, so that you can use them on the fly and not just in prep time. So without further ado, let's hop into the slides. Okay, so I'm going to share Google Chrome. All right, we're shared. And so yes, we got week 5. First thing that we're going to talk about is the hero's journey. Every one of your characters, if they are aligned with your experience or are trying to help you go after your goals, are going to be a hero. We're specifically going to look at 3 parts of the hero's journey for all of you who are not in the know. The hero's journey was developed/discovered by Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. His work is specifically around the monomyth and figuring out how to to see all the similarities between the different myths of different cultures and how they, show how stories work. So essentially, looks we got Jojo here. Hey, Jojo. And so the hero's journey is specifically trying to sort of show like the shape of narrative. And so if you build your life and your characters and your goal setting around the hero's journey, you will naturally sort of fold into how the stories of all cultures since the dawn of human existence have gone, which can be incredibly powerful. So I'll just do a quick rundown. Again, there's the call to adventure. This is when the hero even recognizes that there may be an adventure to go for you in your life and for your characters. It's going to be when you identify a goal, a want, a desire, something, some state B that you want to get to. The refusal of the call is going to be the space where you immediately go, I don't want to do that. That's going to be too hard, or that's too far outside of my self-concept for me to feel like I can make that happen. Then there's, in stories, the meeting of the mentor. In Star Wars, this is where you meet Obi-Wan Kenobi. Crossing the threshold is where you leave, take your first steps out of state A and start playing around in the netherworld in between state A and state B, where then you encounter tests, allies, and enemies. If you've been going through your workbook, your daily adventure log and your weekly adventure log is pretty much going to be where most of your tests, allies, and enemies are showing up. If you're thinking developmentally, allies and enemies start showing up really around developmental level 3, which is Amber. So that's where you're encountering civilization. You're moving from worlds to worlds and figuring out your way. The approach to the inmost cave is where, like Luke approaching the Death Star, you're like, okay, things are about to get real. You've learned a few things. Stuff has gotten fraught, but, you're feeling pretty confident. And then there's the ordeal in the abyss, the facing of the shadow self. Our program has been designed so that you get to encounter your shadow selves pretty quickly, but this is where like the majority of your resistance is going to show up. This is going to be the part of you that's the exact opposite of who you are. And you can sort of see from this beginning of the journey that the ordeal in the abyss is directly across the sort of clock conch shell shape. And so this is when things are going to be like the most hard. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be cool, but you've got to sort of surpass this. The apotheosis is when you've reached, okay, I've solved it. I've learned whatever I needed to learn. And then you gain your ultimate boon, which is usually like your goal. These latter aspects are going to be more long-term stages in the hero's journey. The refusal of the return might be if you're accomplishing a small turn goal, you might not go back to your original state to like integrate that into the larger journey. The road back home might be if you're in, again, a larger journey, like you got to kind of go back where you started so you can get your stuff. And the return with the special knowledge is usually a Master of Two Worlds is you now being able to recognize that, oh, I accomplished this goal. I still remember being my old self. That's really great. And the return with the special knowledge is you having sort of reached into the developmental stage and moving forward. So the most important part of this I highlighted is the refusal of the call, test allies and enemies, and the ordeal in the abyss, the facing of the shadow self, because these are the parts really where a lot of the work that we've been doing is going to be the most effective. The refusal of the call usually comes when people are even coming up with their desire. They come up with their desire, and then because it's not immediately clear how they get to it, they give up. And so that is a character that if you've been doing your 3-2-1s will kind of show up time and time again. And so if you're looking for long-term development, getting good at recognizing when you're refusing the call and finding ways to overcome that very quickly is going to be real important for you. And the test allies and enemies phase, we're actually going to spend a lot of time on how you can really actualize that experience so that it's something tangible and not abstract. And then the facing of the shadow self, again, is just really what the whole work is about. Again, there was another version of this class that was just going to be called shadow boxing, where all of the shadow material that comes up in the form of resistance that stops us from reaching where we want to go is all shadow material. So again, knowing that you're doing this work day in, day out to get good at this is going to help you in your hero's journeys. Now, I bring this diagram up for a number of reasons. One, every goal, every challenge follows the steps of the hero's journey. The bigger the journey, the more easily it's going to be able for you to see each of those steps. Say if you have a year-long journey, the call to adventure, refusal of the call, that's happening in maybe even like months. If you have like a quarterly journey, it's looking more like weeks. 30-day journey, it's in days. But weekly, it's hours of that week. And a daily journey, like you're overcoming major tasks definitely within going through the entire hero's journey cycle within an hour. If you are experiencing resistance, you are on a hero's journey. So when you're looking at your daily work and you're procrastinating, your ability to get over that is for you to have somehow, in some capacity, overcome a hero's journey. And our challenge is going to be making that overcoming as conscious as possible so that you're not doing like what I used to do back in the day, which is just sort of blindly muscle through, having no idea how I accomplished the thing and having to learn the lesson over time. Through repetition. The hero's journey that I was living when I was working my 9-to-5 was very much more of a sitcom style repetition. Maybe I'm sitting in the middle of hell type ordeal. So I just wanted to let you know that. So again, you can sort of think about all of your challenges through this framework. And then the last thing that I wanted to do is that you're also always having 3 heroes' journeys happening. There's this book called The 2 Heroes' Journeys, which is a really great book. Highly recommend it. That sort of talks about story structure and how the hero goes through an external journey and an internal journey. It's fantastic. Highly recommend it. But I'm going to add a third perspective to sort of map how role-playing games sort of happen. And so there's your dungeon master hero's journey, your player hero's journey, and your character hero's journey. So any of the characters that you've developed through your introspective practices, they're going to be on their hero's journey. There is your identity as a player, as someone who has decided this is a good use of one's time to sort of show up every day and then solve the problem of figuring out how to live life well. And then there's your skill as a dungeon master of looking at your life and deciding what you want and what obstacles do you want to face. And thinking of those as separate hero's journeys has been really helpful for me to sort of make me realize, like, what challenge am I facing and which part of myself is dealing with that challenge, so that I don't just get discouraged on something that's really just a character's problem and actually doesn't have me having issues with the larger sort of structure. So in recap of what we did last week, I made this crazy diagram. I made it so I could do this recap, but also to sort of show how to go about creating your worlds. This is sort of a generic template structure of how you can move through a world. And so I don't know, because I'm not inside of your heads, how you've been imagining your worlds, but this is a generic template map. It's a developmental map. It follows the red, amber, orange, green, teal breakdown that we did last week, which I'll go into in a little more detail. But it also kind of shows that because it's a series of concentric circles, you can take any path to develop. Development isn't just moving up, even though that is what I kind of talked about a lot last week, but that when you're moving spatially through a world, the idea is just moving out so that you can have access to more and more different perspectives. And so the benefit of having multiple characters within yourself is the ability to say, while it might just make sense off the jump to go in one direction, knowing that you can try to do something here and be like, that didn't work, I'm going to try to do something here, okay, that didn't work, and that you'll have learning opportunities while still maybe not getting frustrated that things go. Also, it's just, I think, a good way to move through a developmental map in the same way that you have your hero's journey. Every hero's journey kind of also has this sort of developmental process. So when you're thinking of starting a long-term, medium-term, or even short-term process, getting into the habit of thinking like, okay, if I'm starting at red development, what just basic resistance am I overcoming? Like, what's my basic like challenge? Like, what am I fighting against? What's the trap? What's the struggle? If I'm looking at my orange resistance, my amber resistance, which is the next level, the question starts becoming, what structure is already in place in world? What cultural aspects can I sort of rely on? How is there sort of any sort of hierarchy that I have to overcome to solve this goal? Are there any like cultural practices? Are there people that I can model who've already solved this? Or are there any like existent traditions that I can look for to getting through this goal? Say if I was trying to write a book, red is me just realizing I have this desire to write a book and that I need to write something. And then maybe I realize, oh, my writing's bad. Let me go get a writing coach. Let me go read books on writing. That's the amber space. The next space is the orange space, which is sort of the innovation space. That's the space of, okay, now that I've learned everything that I can about the traditions around this goal, and I still haven't solved it for whatever reason, now it's looking to, how do I put my unique spin on this? How do I find something that's more in alignment with my values? So that's when you can go back to the work that we did, I think in week 2, around having values, and say, like, what is the solution that might not be the traditional version, is the one that I can use and help me grow into who I'm learning to be. And then there's the green stage, which is, how can I now ecologically make sure that this goal takes care of? How can I make sure that in pursuing this goal, I'm supporting the rest of the goals in my life? How can I make sure that in pursuing this goal, I'm not violating the rights of other people, that I'm maintaining sort of a sense of harmony? That's the stuff that shows up in the green space. And then the teal space isn't really a space itself. It's the space that allows us to take these different spaces as perspectives. There are its own challenges in the teal space, but by the time you've gotten there, like, you're not really dealing with anything. But these black dots, again, represent different paths that you can take to getting to your goal. So again, I just made this image because I like it. I think it's a nice way to sort of conceptualize a world. And so when you're literally mapping a world, maybe you've just found like a polarity that you want to play around with, finding ways to add, if you're actually like creating like a country that has these layers, finding ways to even like map the geography and the locations in the world onto a structure like this, maybe like throw a river here, some mountains here. Again, play around with it and see something, see if there's something that like really resonates with you. But otherwise, that's that. So there's your map. So what I want to spend a lot of time talking about today, at least the next 10 minutes or so, is a concept called felt character awareness. So the idea is that right now, for a lot of people, your characters may exist as sort of generic, abstract concepts. Like you could recognize them because they're in your workbook. Maybe you've played around with them, but they're not real. And our goal is actually to make them as real as possible, because once you can learn to think, feel, and use intuition of your characters, you truly gained access to their wisdom, and that wisdom will be able to be subconscious. When a problem shows up, like you won't necessarily even have to work really hard to get access to that character. It'll just pop up because you can take that character's perspective. And so that's something that I really suggest people do is, again, start thinking like your character, then starting to figure out what is that character's values and what does it care about, and then even sort of dance into what that character's intuition would be. And that's when your subconscious is really taking over, is when you interact with the character from an intuitive standpoint. So when I say felt awareness, that's really mostly that intuitive space. And so felt awareness is, okay, you're sitting on a chair or on a couch, maybe you're driving, I hope you're not driving, and you have a sense of your body in space. Like, I know that I'm Wendell because I'm here and it feels like me. The ability to have a felt sense of a character awareness is to be able to locate your character either in your body, or if your character kind of exists outside of your body in this abstracted space, to be able to think about your character in such detail that you can kind of imagine what it would literally feel like to be the character. Because now that your characters have sort of monkeyed around and they've existed for long enough and you've gotten to know them, parts of you are going to kind of leak into them and vice versa, and you'll be able to get to a space where you can kind of feel into them. And that can be hard for some people. So the first thing that I'd really do is, and we'll kind of do this all together in a moment, we'll do a little exercise, is first bring the character into mind. We're going to practice this on people that you actually know. Just, it's a little bit easier for people to do that. And then we'll move to characters, and then we'll go to the next stage of the class. But you bring them to mind visually, put them in a context, and then just sort of imagine, like, what could they be feeling right now? And then try and feel that inside of your body. If you see your character being happy, try and feel into that idea of what do you think their happiness feels like. If you are seeing your character be mad or sad or something, again, sort of do that aspect. But what we're really going to do is try and move them through space in your imagination. So you might imagine, what would it feel like in your body for your character to like do some push-ups? What would it feel like in your body for your character to like run half of a mile? We're going to get that detailed, because that body awareness is something that's really important for humans. Like, if you haven't done any body awareness stuff, like, I highly recommend it. Just the wisdom that it's opened up for me to be able to do that is fantastic. And being able to take that to character work is really, really great. You might start seeing your character show up in dreams. That's something that happened to me. That was really weird, but it was also really cool because, again, I was there as them. And so that was really fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to focus on characters that you can do this. So the limit of your ability to use those characters is going to be the limit of how much you're able to feel into their experience. So you might find that certain characters are easier for you to show up with because they feel more like you, but sometimes you'll have problems that you can only solve with characters who are not like you. And so being able to practice pretending to be someone that's not you, or at least that you don't think of as you, is the quickest way to do that. And so an easy way to do that is to actually build a team of characters where there's one that is unfamiliar and maybe two that are familiar, so that you can kind of feel safe doing that. And that'll be an exercise that we do in the latter part of the class. But first, just want you to go ahead and close your eyes, sort of get into a relaxed state, whatever that means for you. Maybe you take a few deep breaths. Maybe you just feel like your muscles unknit. Maybe you've got just a relaxation technique that you use. But as you feel yourself relaxing, go ahead and feel yourself relax more. As you feel yourself relax more, you'll know that that makes you feel like you're relaxing. Every time I say the word relax, you feel a little bit more relaxed. And you go deeper and deeper into your relaxation. You're feeling really good. So the first thing I want you to do is bring up an image of a parent. It's whatever's the easiest parent that you can. It could be your mom, your dad, or whatever your caregiver was. And just imagine them sitting across from you in a chair. And just imagine that they're smiling. And so while you're sort of felt into your body right now, just go ahead and see if you can move your awareness into that imagined version of them. You know it's not them, but just go ahead and try and see what it would feel like to be them, just based on the information that you see that they have. Maybe if your parents are like me, they're a little bit old, so maybe you're feeling a little bit of their creaks and pains. Maybe they're taller than you, so you can kind of feel a sense of, oh, okay, this is what it's like to be taller. Maybe they're shorter than you. Really just trying to feel into their experience. And then as them, maybe stand and sort of just take a walk around the room inside of your mind. See what it's like to walk fast as them. See what it's like to walk slow. See if you can do a few jumps. See how high you feel like you can jump as them without it being too intense. And then after you've done, maybe do a little dance move. Then go ahead and have them sit back down in that chair and bring your awareness back into yourself. Go ahead and, in your imagination, shake your limbs, feel what it's like to be you again, and then go ahead and replace that person with a childhood friend. It can be someone that you still know right now. You can maybe imagine what they look like, or just someone that you can only remember as a child. And again, they're sitting in the chair across the way, and just like before, we'll have you move your awareness into the center of their head and sort of feel what it's like to be them. Sort of let your subconscious fill in the details from what you know about their lives. If they're much younger, maybe they've got more energy than the parent that you just did. Maybe they're, a lot shorter, I imagine. That's definitely something that I'm seeing. And sort of play into their energy levels and maybe see like what emotions show up for them that's different from yours, but that for whatever reason feel right for them. If you're struggling to get this correct, know that you can't do this wrong, mostly because this person that you're feeling into doesn't exist. They're just based off of your perceptions of this person. So whatever you feel is totally correct. It's just what your subconscious thinks it would be like to be this person. And just like before, go ahead and, jump out of your chair, do some laps, take some slow walks, maybe try a push-up, see what that feels like to be that person doing a push-up. See what it's like for them to maybe do a dance move. Maybe this person knows how to moonwalk. Maybe they don't. Maybe you can see what it's like to sit cross-legged, jump up and down, and they'll have you go ahead and sit back in the chair. Before you do, go ahead and observe yourself sitting in that other chair and see what they feel about you from this perspective, how they feel about this person that's looking at them, that's you. See if that changes anything. And then we'll just have you go back inside of your body. And the last person is just going to be whoever you think it would be fun to be like. Maybe it'll be a celebrity, maybe just someone who you've always thought it was be interesting to know what it'd be like to see the world from their perspective. And again, just do what we did before. Move their awareness to the center. Move your awareness to the center of their head, and just take a few walks around the sort of imagined room that you guys are sitting in. It's kind of like trying on a new pair of shoes, kind of getting used to the fit. maybe run a little bit, maybe skip, maybe hop, maybe imagine a hula hoop and feel like what it'd be like to hula hoop with these people. Maybe they can hula hoop and you can't. Anyway, and then once you're done playing around with their experience, go ahead and have them sit down and observe you, sort of see what they think about you, and then switch your consciousness back to your own head. Okay, so the first time I did that, it was really weird, but it was really interesting because it made me realize that, your brain simulates a lot of information, including the information of like what it's like to be someone else. So what we want to do kind of for the next phase of this class is really get into practicing being what it's like to feel your characters. That's going to add like a new dimension. Like if your brain's able to do that for people that you know, it's not too much of a stretch that'll be able to do it for people that are made up. Again, if you're a writer, this is a great exercise to do, really just to like when you're writing descriptions and dialogue, really being able to get inside of your characters is really fantastic. But being able to feel into another person's state is really good for maybe you're doing tasks that you don't like, but you have a character that really does like them. So instead of pretending to be that character in an abstract way, you can do it by actually taking their position, feeling the enjoyment that they get out of doing that task. And sometimes that can be a really big way to eliminate resistance. So I'm just going to keep moving, but that is like, if you add that to like your morning practice, like you've probably again done a bunch of 3, 2, 1s by now. Keep up with that work, but know that like the really good stuff now is going to be like finding the characters that you're really intrigued in playing around with and feeling into the experience of their bodies, because suddenly body wisdom is so fast. So when you can actually sit into your character's body, there's so much less thinking that you have to do to get access to their wisdom. Oh, that was the activity. We already did that. So the next and pretty much last part of this this training today is going to be focused on a game called Training Grounds. This is a game that I use for sort of my daily task work and sometimes my weekly task work. I got feedback from myself and from others that, again, this work has been really abstract. It's been really cool and a really great way to frame it, but like really wanting to like get things in the body. So if you've been going on a journey in your mind and this game doesn't really fit for you, that's totally okay. Use it as an example and then maybe create something that's more meaningful to you. But I played a lot of video games as a kid. So this one kind of is taken from Pokemon Stadium and sort of strategy role-playing games like Fire Emblem, Disgaea, Phantom Brave. So you don't have to have a lot of experience with gaming culture to do this. I'll kind of do it like a meditation and walk you through every stage. But if you wanted to get really good at it, maybe playing a few games like that can help. And again, this is just one that works for me. So I always kind of think about things in this sort of training idea. So the idea of like a stadium where I can go in and practice doing teamwork with my characters against a common enemy that is the problem that I'm solving for. Again, floats really natural to me. But some people kind of like the in the show Community and in Star Trek, they have the holodeck and the Dreamatorium. They just want a space where they can like run simulations and sort of play with their characters. And that works too. Again, this is just something that I do because I enjoy it. And so you can take it, leave it, but this is something that you can do like when you're setting up your 3 top goals for the day. Go ahead and do this for any sort of blocks that show up for you getting that stuff done. And this can be really helpful. So I'm just going to tell you what it's going to look like ahead of time. This is one in which being surprised isn't that useful, so that you can already get your mind going before we throw you into it. But we're essentially going to imagine a stadium where all your personalities are in the stands. So everyone that you've created, and also we're going to create space for ones that you haven't created yet. The idea is just we're going to let your subconscious go free. The really big power of this technique is that this is the one in which your subconscious actually does most of the driving. It can get a little spooky sometimes, but there's a way in which it's almost like you're just observing your own brain take care of this problem for you. It's incredibly powerful, but a little weird. So again, I want to give you a heads up before we get into it. And the stands of this stadium are organized by developmental levels. So all the red personalities are sitting in one section. The amber personalities are sitting in another. The green, the teal, etc. And they're all there. And the main thing that you need to know, and this is just true, is that every single one of those characters in the stand, at least in this context, want the exact same thing, which is to help you overcome the problem. Now, they also, because they're the audience, they want a good show. And so a lot of the resistance comes from the fact that like our subconscious doesn't feel like we really earned the goal that we're going for. So it makes us work. It brings us resistance to make sure that we feel like we're in alignment with what we're allowed to get. So every single one of these people wants you to succeed, but also is rooting for a close fight. So the next step would be then to visualize the problem that you're trying to overcome, which shows up in two spaces as environmental factors in the stadium. So maybe you visualize your problem as a trek through a jungle and you've got a kind of Legends of the Hidden Temple style solve a puzzle. Or maybe whatever your problem is, say for me, it's procrastination writing. It always shows up as this like mountain climb deal where little gremlins are trying to knock me off the rocks, kind of Donkey Kong style. And again, your imagination is really going to fill that in for you. I'm throwing these examples out just to prime the pump. But you'll create the environment, and then you'll create just a physical representation of the challenge and the reward. So you can kind of imagine like in Star Wars Episode 2, where they go into the Geonosis Coliseum and they had to fight those 3 different monsters that kind of each connected to each of the characters' personalities. George Lucas, I think, has done work like this before, either on purpose or by accident. But that's the idea, is that you'll want to create challenges that are well suited to the characters that you're then going to bring in. And then you'll overcome the challenge. Again, that'll show up in the sort of walkthrough that we're going to do. And you'll know that you've made it because you'll see yourself overcoming the challenge in your mind. And so once you've created that challenge, you'll bring your characters into it. So the idea is that like you'll sort of scan the stadium and pick a character that comes to mind, either one that you've already decided that you want to work with that day or that week, or just one that you feel like is uniquely suited to the problem. We establish the problem first so that you're not necessarily inclined to always go to the same characters that just feel comfortable, so that you can actually really start being strategic about how you want to solve these problems. Before you pick your characters, once you see the kind of challenge as it emerges in your brain, you sort of have to ask yourself, what resources do you think you'll need to overcome that challenge? What will you need to overcome the terrain? Or how can you use the terrain to give yourself an advantage? And are there any out-of-the-box ways to solve the problem? And that kind of accounts for, different developmental ways of thinking about it in the red, the amber, and the orange space. And then you'll pick at least 3 characters from a different developmental level. This is just good because that's just a very strong teal way of thinking, which is to say, oh, each of these have their strengths and their weaknesses, and they should be aligned just so. You can actually bring as many characters as you want. It just can get really difficult to juggle a bunch in your head all at once, and it can sometimes take a while. So as you get better at this, you can levy as many characters as you want, but 3 is a good place to start. And what you'll do when you bring those characters in is we'll do just like what we did for the imagined family members and childhood friend. You'll feel into what it's like to be that character in that stadium at that time. What you will find is that you'll start realizing, oh, this problem that seems super easy for me, I'm able to actually experience the fear from my subconscious that's showing up. This is the person who's best capable of solving the problem, but they also have their own internal world about like fear and anxiety and stuff too. So that again can give you some insight as to why you might be blocked on something that seems like not a big deal at the huge altitude. So you'll feel into each of the characters, and then you'll also see the problem from their point of view through their eyes. So again, ask yourself the questions of what does this particular character need to overcome the challenge? What will they do to overcome the terrain and give themselves an advantage? And do they have any specific out-of-the-box ways to solve the problem? You'll feel into the next character that you choose, which again, can just be anyone that you have access to from any of the developmental levels. Do the exact same thing. Do it for the third character, but then also make sure as you jump through those perspectives that you see how the characters feel about working together. Sometimes you might have picked a group of characters that are like, these guys individually can solve the problem, but they don't like each other. And so the thing they might have to overcome is having teamwork. So again, just keep that in mind as you go about and solve the problem. And then as we go through sort of the meditation, you'll really just observe the characters solve it. Like you can take the perspective at any time and sort of feel into what they're feeling. But the main idea is to really just sit back and watch the characters go after the problem, knowing that they're going to succeed, but that they're going to struggle. Your subconscious essentially is fighting itself to show you the way for how you need to overcome that problem. Because if you're anything like me, the actual task isn't difficult. It's really just sorting out that internal work. And if that internal work has been so invisible for most of your life, it's really hard to kind of overcome. And so this is just another way to give your brain something to latch on to and give you access to your own intuition for how best you want to solve that problem. So right now, we're gonna do this. And so you can bring up any characters that you've already worked with. If you don't have any characters that are immediately jumping to mind, trust me, your subconscious will solve it. You'll actually probably create a new one. Your subconscious will solve for it just because it'll pull just any ones that it knows. And I'll walk you through each of those stages so that we can sort of test this out. And then, yeah, pick sort of a problem that's top of mind. Maybe you can start with something small just to really, see if you're getting the visualization right. But you can go as big as you want. Like I kind of kicked the tires of this in a number of different angles, and it's really able to give you at least some bit of wisdom for how to go about solving whatever problem you throw at it this way. So let us begin. So again, we just go ahead and get into a relaxed state. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths. We'll go ahead and have you imagine a stadium built out of light. The camera starts over the top of the stadium and you see that it's filled with a bunch of different characters. Some of them are you recognize. Some of them are the ones that you've done introspective work with already. Some of them have taken the face of friends, family members, people that you've met. You can kind of see that they're organized based on their developmental level. The level at the bottom is red. Then there's the amber stage. There's the orange stage. And then at the top, there's the green. And sprinkled in amongst them, you see some teal characters, but there's probably not a whole lot of those, but you see them all sort of separated. And you start to notice that all of them are cheering for you. There's no away section. There's no home section. Everyone's a home section. Everyone's excited for you to overcome this challenge. And as you can feel the excitement of the stadium as everyone's really, really, really excited for this to go down. You start to notice that as you hold your problem that you're wanting to solve in your mind, maybe you feel the tension of that problem in your body, you start noticing that the terrain changes to match whatever that problem is for you. It changes and it shifts so that it looks perfectly like how you would imagine if you were to go someplace to solve this problem, what it would look like. You see it there, and so that change gets made over time, and then eventually it sort of locks into place. And you see sort of on a billboard or a jumbotron, a visualization of sort of a monster or a challenger that shows up in the Colosseum. Maybe they're a creature or a beast, Maybe it's just a person, but you see them and they represent the problem, the sort of challenger that's going to be fighting against you in this training match. And you also see on the Jumbotron sort of a symbol of success. Maybe you've got to go collect an egg, or maybe you've got to reach a certain number of points, or maybe you've got to collect a medallion. Just there's something there that sort of represents success, and you'll know that you've succeeded once you and your party have made it to that successful point. And so as you're looking at this terrain and you're seeing this challenger, they take a few minutes. Your subconscious actually is guiding them. They take a few minutes to sort of set themselves up in the terrain, and you get a sort of vibe about them, and you're starting to wonder, I wonder how they're going to stop me from getting at that goal. I wonder what their strategy is going to be. As you're thinking about this, thinking about maybe what resources that you'll need to overcome this challenge, maybe what tools and resources you'll need to make it through this terrain, maybe what sort of tips and tricks you've learned throughout your life that can sort of help you out with this. A character sort of pops to mind. It's the first character you're like, yeah, this person would be a good fit. And maybe they're from the red developmental level. Maybe they're from amber or orange or green. But you sort of see this character very clearly. And they're standing outside the combat area. And you move your awareness into the center of their head. And you start kind of putting on their body. You kind of feel into their emotions. Maybe they're feeling a little bit nervous. Maybe they're feeling super excited. Maybe they're feeling a sense of peace. They're just, whatever they're doing, they're seeing this sort of situation, and based on their experience and how you've created them, they've got a sort of a view on how they think about taking on this challenge. And so they kind of go to the barracks and they pull out whatever weapons or technology or things that they're going to need to be successful. And they wait. As they're getting prepared, another character pops to mind. Again, maybe they're from a different developmental level. So maybe they're from red or amber, orange, green. But they're here to sort of solve for this problem as well. And they bring with them their wisdom and understanding. And again, your awareness shifts into their perspective, and you start seeing, well, how do you think they would solve this problem, and how are they feeling about solving the problem? And even more than that, how are they feeling about working with that first character that you sort of built up? Are they longtime collaborators, or are they meeting for the first time? You know that they both want to win, but you want to hold awareness of their relationship. Maybe they'll be motivated with each other by shared background, or maybe it'll be through competition. Maybe they just are there for the common good. Maybe they share the same values. So this character is going to go, and as they sort of assess the situation, they're going to go get equipment that connects to how they think they'll solve the problem. And while they're doing that, they might even have a dialogue with that first character and start talking basic strategy on how they want to go about solving this. And as they're talking, just by themselves, you don't even need to really attend to that. Your subconscious will do that for you. You think about your third character. Your third character is from another developmental level. And if you haven't already, this can go ahead and be the level that you sort of identify as yourself. Just any character that you can sort of bring to mind that has that perspective. And just like with those other characters, they're sort of assessing the situation and saying, like, well, how can they leverage their unique skills to solve this problem? And maybe they're thinking about the resources that they'll need to overcome this, and other different strategies based on their experience. And you get into the center of their head, you feel their body, you feel like how they feel about the problem. And they go over and then powwow those first two characters as well. So as these characters start kind of talking and conversing, the camera pans out a little bit. Now you've got a bird's eye view of how they're choosing to sort of solve this problem based on how you've sort of conceived of what's really the problem in the situation. And so they go about solving it. Maybe it happens in slow motion, maybe it happens really quickly, but you start seeing the patterns, the strategies. You see your subconscious mind, their controlled character thwarting them, maybe trying to split them apart, maybe trying to just hold a line against them. Maybe they've set traps, but they sort of keep fighting and learning different things about how to sort of overcome that challenge. And as you watch this, you're learning more and more about how your mind works. You're kind of amused, and you kind of hear the crowd reacting to the different strategies that your characters use. The parts of yourself that share the same developmental level are rooting for those parts of your personality. Everyone's rooting against the subconscious, but they kind of get a kick out of that. And again, you're just observing the whole scene and feeding on that sort of joyful energy of a good fight, a good time is being had. And maybe you're just getting glimpses of them solving the problem. Maybe you're struggling to see it at all. Maybe the terrain is maybe it's covered in trees and you can't actually see what's happening, but you can feel it as you jump into each of those characters' perspectives, how they're feeling about it. And over time, you'll start to feel one of the characters sense that they're getting closer and closer to success. You just kind of feel it. You can hear it from the audience as they get closer and closer. Everyone in the audience can see the progress. We'll go ahead and say that right now that you've succeeded. Once you hear the snap of my fingers, that you know that your characters have sort of made it. And so then you'll see on the billboard sort of the key moments from the conflict, and it'll show you exactly what you need to know, what you need to learn, what skills were used to overcome this specific problem. And maybe there's an interview with another character as each of the characters start kind of revealing how they felt about going about the problem, but specifically sharing how happy they are about having overcome it. And at that, just sort of ask your subconscious to integrate all those lessons, and then we'll come out of the meditation. So again, this is a really fun one. I'll chop this part up, put it in a recording so that you can use it on your own for the first few times, just to practice kind of thinking in that way. Because again, it sometimes can feel a little passive, but if you just kind of allow your subconscious to do most of the work, it can really clear away a lot of resistances that you might have towards doing any task. Starting off, I'd maybe add it to, again, your beginning of the day, just to sort of even plan out how if the problem that you're trying to solve for is having a successful day, just even playing through the day with the different characters that you want to have can be useful. But again, the key is play around with it. And again, maybe you go with the holodeck strategy, or maybe you come up with your own, really just finding something that you feel comfortable, creating a clear challenge, accessing the feelings of your characters, and letting them kind of on their own solve the problems for you. So that is today's that's today's lesson. Yeah, that's all I got. If you got any questions, I'm totally happy to take them, but I'm going to get off of recording right now. How do I do that?